We are living in a dark period. To understand the present, one must know the past. Those who can change the present will master the future. After World War II, the French returned to Indochina and encountered strong resistance from the Vietnamese people. Emperor Bao Dai declared independence in March 1945 and simultaneously annulled the treaties signed with France at the end of the 19th century. He later abdicated and ended the monarchy, transferring the governance of the country to a state he hoped would be modern and democratic. The Democratic Republic of Vietnam was established, but it was quickly monopolized by a group of communist leaders. This government failed in its negotiations with the French and was unable to prevent their return. The Franco-Vietnamese War erupted in 1946. After 3 years of war, the French were compelled to negotiate with the Vietnamese nationalists on a solution for an independent Vietnam within the French Union. This arrangement allowed Vietnam to gradually develop in all aspects, economically, financially, militarily, and politically. The state of Vietnam was established and became the sole legitimate representative of Vietnam recognized by the international community, under the leadership of Chief of State Bao Dai. In the early 1950s, the United States began providing military and financial aid to Vietnam through France, in the war against the Viet Minh in Indochina. France's defeat in 1954 led to the loss of half of the territory of the state of Vietnam to the Communists. When the Republic of Vietnam was established, the United States continued its support to help the Southern government resist the Communist North. The Geneva Accords of 1954 were a series of agreements reached at the Geneva Conference, aimed at ending the First Indochina War between France and the Viet Minh. According to the terms of the accords, Vietnam was temporarily divided at the 17th parallel. The North came under Communist control led by Ho Chi Minh, while the South was administered by the State of Vietnam. This division was intended to be provisional, with plans for nationwide elections in 1956 to reunify the country, but those elections never took place. The accords also stipulated the withdrawal of French troops and recognized the independence of Laos and Cambodia. Although the United States and the Republic of Vietnam did not sign the document, the Geneva Accords laid the groundwork for the Vietnam War that followed. After the Geneva Accords of 1954, the communist regime in the North implemented a series of harsh policies to consolidate its power. These included land reform accompanied by bloody denunciation campaigns, suppression of religion and intellectuals, nationalization of private businesses, and strict control over individual freedoms. At the same time, the northern authorities aggressively prepared for war, aiming to seize the South by force. These measures caused widespread terror and suffering, prompting nearly 1 million people to flee the North and migrate to the South in search of freedom. The Republic of Vietnam in the South was dubbed the Pearl of the Far East, for its prosperity, openness, and vibrant international exchange. Saigon became a hub of free press, artistic activity, and political pluralism. However, the Communists continuously undermined the South through acts of terrorism, carried out by operatives embedded in the region. The atmosphere of freedom also allowed some intellectuals and third-party elements to promote neutralist positions or dialogue with the North, often without recognizing the authoritarian and violent nature of the Northern regime. Between 1961 and 1963, under President Kennedy, the United States sent thousands of military advisors to train the Army of the Republic of Vietnam. In 1963, the First Republic collapsed, with the tragic death of President Ngo Dinh Diem. The United States sought direct military intervention in Vietnam in response to the growing strength of North Vietnamese communists, who were backed by the international communist bloc. Throughout the Vietnam War, beginning in the 1960s, North Vietnamese communists launched hundreds of military operations, large and small, year after year until 1975. From 1964 to 1973, the United States began large-scale combat operations in 1965, deploying hundreds of thousands of troops. This period witnessed intense battles, including the infamous Tet Offensive in 1968, alongside a rapidly growing anti-war movement. In July 1971, the United States National Security Advisor Henry Kissinger undertook a secret diplomatic mission to Communist China, marking a turning point in the geopolitical landscape of the Cold War era. This covert trip, codenamed Operation Marco Polo, was intended to pave the way for dialogue between the United States and the People's Republic of China, which had been isolated from the Western world since 1949. The strategy helped counterbalance Soviet influence, reshape global alliances, and initiate China's reintegration into the international system.
Biên bản buổi họp giữa ông Chu Ân Lai và ông Kissinger Mà cái biên bản đó không phải là do phe Mỹ làm, mà do phía Trung Cộng làm. Trong cái đoạn đó có nói rằng là Chu Ấn Lai có hỏi ông Kissinger là vấn đề Việt Nam thì ông Mỹ tính sao? Thì phía Mỹ, ông Kissinger trả lời là nếu nước Mỹ có thể chấp thuận một nước Trung Quốc Cộng sản thì chúng tôi cũng có thể chấp nhận một nước Việt Nam Cộng sản.
In 1973, the Paris Peace Accords led to the complete withdrawal of the United States combat forces from Vietnam, officially ending America's direct military involvement. Although the United States continued to provide financial and logistical aid to the Republic of Vietnam, the support was insufficient and inconsistent, leaving the South Vietnamese government increasingly isolated. Meanwhile, the North violated the terms of the agreement, resumed military operations, and prepared for a large-scale offensive. These violations culminated in the fall of Saigon in April 1975, marking the end of the war and the reunification of Vietnam under a one-party communist regime. Vietnamese boat people were refugees who fled their homeland by sea after the fall of Saigon in 1975, seeking escape from political persecution, re-education camps, and economic collapse under the communist regime. From the late 1970s to the mid-1990s, over 1 million people risked their lives aboard overcrowded, often unseaworthy boats, facing storms, starvation, and pirates. Western nations, including the United States, Canada, Australia, France, Germany, and many others, responded with humanitarian resettlement programs such as the Orderly Departure Program and the Comprehensive Plan of Action, helping more than 1.6 million Vietnamese refugees integrate into new societies. Despite initial hardships, the boat people and their descendants became well-integrated members of Western society, contributing to fields such as medicine, engineering, business, and education. Their success is often attributed to strong family values, resilience, and a deep emphasis on education, making them a powerful example of refugee integration and cultural adaptation. The Berlin Wall collapsed in November 1989, becoming a symbol of the end of the Iron Curtain. Meanwhile, in Communist China, similar calls for reform reached a peak with the Tiananmen Square protests in June 1989, where students and citizens demanded democratic freedoms. This movement was brutally suppressed by the Chinese authorities, resulting in a bloody crackdown that left hundreds, possibly thousands, dead. Unlike Eastern Europe, where most communist regimes fell, the Chinese leadership retained power, choosing a path of economic reform without expanding political freedoms. The Soviet Union, on the other hand, dissolved in December 1991, marking the end of the Cold War and reshaping the global geopolitical landscape. Not only did it blatantly trample on human rights, but China's accession to the World Trade Organization, WTO, in December 2001, also marked a major turning point that disrupted the global economic and geopolitical landscape. Western leaders had hoped this step would lead China toward political liberalization and a market-based economy. However, China maintained its state-controlled economic model, leveraging WTO access to aggressively boost exports and industrial development. China's entry into the WTO not only transformed international trade, but also reshaped the global balance of power, challenged Western economic models, and left lasting impacts on global inflation and real estate markets. After half a century of stagnation, Vietnam is facing a troubling reality. Its development strategy, built on borrowing, is masked by a facade of propaganda about progress. Widespread poverty continues to plague a large portion of the population, while persistent inequality in education is evident in under-resourced schools and limited access to quality learning. Corruption has become deeply entrenched in the system, with recurring scandals and administrative dysfunction eroding public trust. Many observers argue that moral and ethical standards have deteriorated, as nepotism and factional favoritism increasingly overshadow talent and integrity. These conditions have fueled a growing wave of disillusionment, prompting countless Vietnamese, including youth and disaffected Communist Party members, to seek a way out of the country in pursuit of dignity, freedom, and a brighter future. This migration reflects a profound and public dissatisfaction that continues to challenge the nation's aspirations for unity, justice, and genuine progress. Now is the time for us to take responsibility and shape a future worthy of us. Dictators often maintain power through violence, censorship, and control, but what truly threatens them is freedom of speech and the exposure of truth. Guns and violence may challenge their physical authority, but are easily suppressed. In contrast, open dialogue, independent media, and uncensored information undermine their legitimacy, expose corruption, and awaken public consciousness. When people begin to think freely, question propaganda, and share ideas, the foundations of authoritarian regimes begin to crack. That is why dictators fear voices more than weapons, because once truth spreads, it is nearly impossible to silence. In addition, we must support political prisoners in Vietnam, such as Lua Din Luong, Vong Ton Thuan, Nguyen Chi Tuen, Nguyen Vu Ben, Phan Van Bach, No T Tanin, Trang Hui San, also known as Hui Duc, Lo Man Hung, Dang Din Bach, Bui Van Thuan, Trinh Batu, Dung Van Tai, Nguyen T Tom, and many others. This list reflects the alarming state of human rights in Vietnam today, where dissenting voices are still suppressed and basic freedoms are trampled. Let us fully exercise our freedom of speech, start blogging, create video diaries, speak out, and expose the truth. Stand in solidarity with other activists and amplify their voices. Raise global awareness about the violations committed by the communist authorities in Vietnam. Refuse to support oppressive systems, stop using the currency of communist Vietnam, boycott its financial networks and the party's economic structures. Every year, join the 4-day walk in the Netherlands to honor the yellow flag. The Honor the Yellow Flag of the Republic of Vietnam Association has established a group called the Descendants of the Republic of Vietnam, with the goal of bringing together young people of Vietnamese descent to preserve Vietnamese traditions and promote the spirit of the Republic of Vietnam. This group is continually guided, supported, and mentored by the Honor the Yellow Flag Association. Finally, let us participate in summer camps organized by Vietnamese refugees around the world. These actions are not just acts of resistance, they are the foundation for a better future.